All right, we are live. We are live. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. We have our powerful powerhouses here again tonight. Carlos and Yax in the building. We're going to be touching on that. But before we touch on what the topic is tonight, I just want to let y'all know the past book signing on Saturday was great. It was excellent. I appreciate y'all, for coming out and supporting. A lot of great people, a lot of sponsors, that I've been in contact with, coming to speak in different events near you. Again, the Unspoken Truth and Life Story. Go get it, KeenanHudson.com. Don't forget. Really appreciate y'all. Now let's get to business. Here we go. We got a powerful topic tonight. Men and violence. And it's something that was actually coordinated by Yex. Yex is about to take over this podcast, like literally. We're going to have some great dialogue. But how y'all feeling tonight? Carlos, Yex, let me know. Yex, I'm going to start with you first. You are the lady. How are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling good. I had a relaxed day, so I've been looking forward to this conversation. Kind of high energy. I've been having a chill day, so yeah.
Cool. Carlos, tell me how you feel before we start this thing off.
I had the opposite day. I had a stressful day.
Oh man.
Yeah, I
You
had
want to expand a little bit?
a little testimony at the Capitol today about some laws that are being passed, and it was intense. It was intense.
Oh wow, my bad, big ball. You having the capital and all this. You at the capital of the United States or what? What you like? But that's what's up though. But no, we're gonna have to get ready to get started on this little podcast. Dealing with men and violence. Men and violence on the No Excuse It podcast. So we're gonna just go ahead and let Yex go ahead and start something off with this. Yex, I want you to go ahead and introduce why you come up with a topic like this.
All right. So first of all, I want to clarify, right? Carlos picked this title, right? The topic and the title are a conflation of many things. So Carlos picked the topic men and violence. And what I really wanted to dig in is multi-layered trauma, right? But multi-layered trauma is so broad and it can stem from a lot of different places. So we wanted to use men and violence as that precipice. So the reason why I brought this up, first of all, I feel like it's a continuation from the conversation we were having last week on a child is not an adult. And beyond that, I've been having these encounters. Specifically, I was out in Springfield performing, and it was a conference, and there were a lot of motivational speakers that were all men. And all of these brothers were getting up on that mic and they were holding themselves very accountable to all of the trauma and pain that is inflicted in our communities. So I had to jump on the mic and say, while men are or need to be extremely accountable for their actions and for how they act as containers of society, the reality is the system has created it so that our men are broken containers. So what are the deeper implications in that when it comes to trauma and men being the head or leading, right? Or us being in a patriarchal society? So I want to ask both of y'all a question, because as a woman, again, I can only act as a spectator. I can't say what it is to live and be a Black or brown man in society and know what it is to have to face the challenges that y'all face, with the agency and the responsibility that comes with all of that. So the question that I have for y'all is, what do you guys feel like is your responsibility to that? What do you feel like you have to own when it comes to trauma in your community or men and violence specifically?
I think for me, you want me to take that first, Keenan, or do you want to go?
Sure. Take it away.
Okay, so for me, I was very violent. Like, I'm not gonna minimize that at all. I was very violent. I was introduced to violence at an early age. And the first experience I had was when I was young. I was coming back from school. I wanted to take a shortcut. My cousin, who's Puerto Rican as well, said we couldn't go through there because there were African American children. And I couldn't understand the problem, so I decided to still go that way. But I ended up getting chased out of the playground. I never understood it, but I just knew that whenever I saw African American kids, I would have to fight them. And also with other Hispanic kids as well. And then the violence was being perpetuated at my home again, with my father beating on my mother and my mother beating on us and my father beating on everybody. So early on, this was my experience. During my incarceration, the 24 years that I was in there, when I decided to start changing, I had to take accountability for many things. But one of the things that I noticed is that as I was pulling away from the violence, there was still a lot of it around me. And I'm speaking about gay bashing, objectifying women, and all of those things. And so I repeatedly had to put myself in a position where I let people know, listen, if I do not like protest against this at the moment, then I'm complicit in that. And I don't like the feeling that I'm entertaining what's going on here by your idea that I'm that kind of person. And so I would make it perfectly clear, like, listen, I don't have a problem with homosexuals. First of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Secondly, if you're going to think that because I defend a homosexual, like I would defend a woman who's being attacked or a child who's being oppressed or anything like that, then that's your issue, not mine. And I remember that I did a presentation in my communications class, and I titled it, I Am Whatever Oppression Looks Like.
Mm.
And it's based on this idea that if one person in our society or if our community is being oppressed and we don't do something about it, then we're opening up space for that oppression to increase and spill over into other areas. And so I've tried to make it clear that whether it's a woman, a child, a homosexual, transgender, whatever may have you, if we see somebody being oppressed unjustly, then there's something that has to be said about that. And I think that the silence that goes on in those spaces is what contributes to it. So I tried my best. And I've even gone so far as to when people question me, like, are you gay? In prison, I know where that's coming from because there's this hierarchy that goes on. So, and there's this low comparison of standards. Like the murderer will compare himself to the attempted murderer. The attempted murderer will compare himself to the guy who just robbed somebody. And the guy who just robbed somebody will compare himself to the guy who's in there for sexual assault. So we pride ourselves in prison off of this low comparison standards that make us feel great when in reality is perpetuating this idea of violence that's just traumatizing over and over again. So when dudes are asked me, listen, are you gay? Why are you defending gay people? I would refuse to answer because I don't want to be a part of them thinking that I believe by saying no, there's something wrong with that. So that's the position I took. And it was difficult, but you know, it's something that had to be done.
Wow. And I think that's pretty profound that you say what you said, Yex, like far as like what responsibility do we have concerning men and violence. Now, when we look back at our childhood, we grow up in a way of, hey, if somebody hits you, you hit them back. That's actually the first form of violence that a young kid, especially young males, are taught. And of course, there's different stages of violence. One comes from fighting in the household. Next, you're fighting on the street, probably grabbing a knife or grabbing a bat, at somebody. That's how a lot of people are sucked into these gangs. So again, when we look at, like you said, the responsibility of our actions, just in general, even as a juvenile, I mentioned in the other day in my book signing that sometimes even juveniles are not able to rationalize. They're not able to think. They're not able to understand consequences for actions. Me, I was 15 years old, right, getting involved in a robbery that turned fatal. Now, mind you, I wasn't the one that had the gun. However, one of my accomplices did. You know what I'm saying? And by me, being, involved, me setting the thing up and being involved in that homicide, does that make me a violent person? You know what I'm saying? But of course, the system says, hey, conspiracy is conspiracy. If you conspire to do anything and if something does go wrong, you're still held accountable. Do I accept responsibility for my actions? Yes, absolutely. But to say, oh, this person, am I a killer, this, and the third? No, I won't say that. But at the same time, we're still condoning violence. Violence doesn't necessarily mean that, that somebody got killed. Somebody could, be traumatized. You know what I'm saying? Just by, the robbery that was committed. You know what I mean? But like you said, how many of us been traumatized when we were kids? Or we seen acts of men beating on our mothers. You know what I'm saying? Or different people beating on our sisters and baby mamas, et cetera, et cetera. All of this is a reflection of the things that we've been through, throughout our lives. And that's pretty much what I'm seeing. Like I said, I'm getting here. But you had something to say, Carlos?
No,
Yeah.
I want to jump in really quickly
Go ahead.
Yeah.
because I appreciate what both of you guys are saying. You guys cut into a lot of different layers that contribute to this dynamic, right? So what Carlos said was extremely profound, right? Both things are true. It is that we have to be accountable for more than just ourselves, right? And that in that space of accountability, that there are things that you yourself may not be a transgressor directly of, but the silence condones the violence and it continues this cyclical perpetuation. So now what I want to throw at y'all is this line from one of my good friends poem pieces, right? And his name is Rashid, but his stage name is Ibn, and he has this great way of thinking about things. And this piece is called The Curdling of Self. And in this piece, he talks about how, as a man, women and other individuals in society look at Black men as being inherently, or Black and brown men, oppressed men, as being inherently privilege, inherently grandfathered into the male patriarchy privilege that exists in this country. And he says, but I am not white, therefore I am not a man. Right? So there is this dehumanizing of the Black and brown man, this load of responsibility that he is burdened by, but the lack of agency in that space of privilege that you guys get to capitalize on, because you do not. You feel all of the effects of the oppression, none of the effects of the privilege of being a man in society, right? And then you have people shouting at you, male patriarchy, male patriarchy, male patriarchy, right? So that's what I want to throw into that, is that thought, right, about the responsibility versus the agency.
So I'll take it again. I think the question is difficult because what's going on is that while we're taking responsibility, we're minimizing it by taking that position. And so if we think about the kind of culture that we're raised in, and we consider music, for example, we can say all the time, it's bad to objectify women. It's bad to speak in a misogynistic way. But as soon as you put a beat behind it or a melody, everybody's singing to that tune without realizing what's being perpetuated in people's minds and what they're practicing. In my experience, what I found is that a lot of men, when it comes to their ideas about women, they're not as sensitive as it should be. And I can also put myself in that example. I grew up with a mother who I craved for her affection, craved it, like was starved for it. But I wasn't safe in that environment. And so what I ended up doing, because I wasn't safe, I ended up pretending. And what I didn't realize that pretending was doing, it was undercutting all of my potential to naturally develop emotions. And so what I would find when I would meet women that I liked, I would force the emotion. I would be like, she's a great person. She's a great human being. I have to like her. But in pushing myself to like them, it wouldn't allow it. Like it would just be a cutoff completely. And that would happen over and over and over again. So I had to realize exactly where that problem was. And it was in my seeking validation and projecting the idea that my mother was every single woman that I met. And so I had to look deep into what that pretending was about and deal with it on a very personal level so that I could have healthy and productive relationships, so on and so forth. Um, but when I speak to other men about being as careful with women, it always seems like going back to that low standard comparison that is happening again. And so because our mothers were beat by our parents, we just think that we're moving a step from that, it's okay. So, okay, I may not beat on my wife, but if I cheat on her, then she should be grateful. Or if I don't cheat on my wife, but I lied to her, then she should be grateful too. Or if I don't even lie to her, but if I don't come home and take care of her and show her attention, then that's great as well. So we're always operating on the low level scale where we think that if we're not like our parents or we're not like the culture that represents, and we're doing something a little bit better, then it's great. But in reality, that gets us absolutely nowhere.
All right,
Because
I want to
violence,
jump in real quick on that.
go ahead.
So I was watching this video recently, like literally like yesterday. I can't remember who the actor was, but he's from the UK. And he was talking about how he knew he was home, and not saying like he literally landed and he knew he was home, but what were the cultural nuances that allowed him to know that he was home. And he said when he got in the taxi and the taxi driver, who was a man, said, "Where you going, love?" He knew that he was home. And this man in a room full of other men on this podcast almost began to cry at the thought of a man being able to express that level of sentiment. So I'm going to turn it to Demonte real quick last week, and I'm going to start digging in on the historical references, right? Because there is so much to be said about the accountability that is forced on Black and brown men without the historical context that supports why they are even like this in the first place, right? We are one of the only countries, foreigners do not experience this at the level that we do, that men do not get to openly express emotion with each other, right? You see in other countries, foreigners hug, they cry, they laugh together. Men are able to vent, to express the full spectrum of emotion. Whereas in America, there is what the term that has been coined as toxic masculinity, right? And really, toxic masculinity is synonymous with the white patriarchy. It is not directly synonymous with Black and brown males. So when we start thinking about these dynamics, we have young boys who are growing into spaces that are already trauma riddled, but also do not have the ability, the guidance, the wherewithal, none of that. They have not been taught how to express or navigate the spectrum of emotions, right? The only emotions that men are allowed to experience in America is anger, right? Is what hypersexuality is, cockiness, is being boastful, braggadocious, all of these different things that lie in that toxic masculine spectrum and not in the entire spectrum of what it is to be a human. Because whether it's a boy or a girl, you guys are human, right? So I say that to say that when we think about what this historically looks like for Black and brown men in our country, is that from the inception of colonization, that what we have seen is the intentional emasculation of Black and brown men, right? So there are these opposing forces that are happening at the same time. We have Black men and brown men being, whether we want to call it literally or figuratively, castrated from then until now, publicly humiliated and emasculated, whether it's the Willie Lynch letter or it's Kanye West, and this need or this force of responsibility on them, right? To own all of the trauma that exists in society. So you said something multiple times. You said your mother inflicted a lot of trauma on you, right? So there is so much to be said about the statistics of what single mother households produce in terms of education, in terms of the the school to prison pipeline system, in terms of teenage pregnancy. So when I was at this function in Springfield, and all of these brothers were taking accountability. I had to get on the mic and I had to say, as brothers, I to see that as a woman, I appreciate that. But as a Black woman, I need to stop and be able to say, why? How have we contributed to the broken container, which is the Black and brown men, right? And we constantly see these conversations and these back and forth debates about men versus women, and there is something that is always removed from that space, right? It's an entire generation. Modern men, the modern woman, talking about what people used to do back in the days, how our parents used to be back in the days, and the generation that is missed or that is glossed over is the one that was affected by the crack epidemic, that removed parents directly from the household and created this dynamic that exists now, that created single mother households, that when women say that I can do it myself, what she is talking about is survival. She's talking about surviving, not thriving, right? She's talking about, yes, I can make it happen, but no, I cannot instill the fortitude that a man instills. I cannot provide the protection that a man provides. So what happens in that space is mothers inflict a lot of trauma on their children. Now, if I have boys, I have 3, right? I can't remember how many you said your mother had, Carlos.
8.
8 boys, all boys?
1 girl.
7 boys. And I had 3. That I feel a due diligence to raise my boys a very specific way, because I know I'm not raising them for myself. I'm raising them for society, right? So that places an extreme amount of responsibility on me in consideration as to what kind of men I am producing for society. Because whether the daddy there is not, whether the father there is there or not, is not the point, right? Because I am in whatever position that I am in that moment, and I still am left with the responsibility of what kind of child, adult am I going to be producing out into society. So I think that there is a deeper conversation that needs to be had. And I know men have a lot of difficulty in addressing their mothers and being able to go beyond all of these surface symptoms and dig at the real root, because that's the only way to cure things, is to really dig at the root, and to really dig at the root of the dynamic that was created that made the mother so toxic that she perpetuates the trauma inside of the home and produces young men who go out into society and continue that cycle.
Keenan?
Wow, yeah, that's deep. And I see some of these comments here as well. Merari, she was saying some stuff here. She said all begins with childhood trauma, abuse, fatherless homes, depressed mothers, and all this, like you said, these are all triggers of the trauma, within an individual, like you said, such as the kids, the son, you know what I mean? As Carlos mentioned, like, how your mom, how she placed such an impact on you, you know what I mean? That you look for certain things, in other people, that you probably used to see in her. And you got right here, this is Antoine. He says misplaced rage. Wow, that's deep. That's a good thing there. Then you got Dee Dee here. She said she agreed a lot of things you were saying as well. Here go. She had another comment. She said if our male child has no role model, she said models they have identity issues. Models have identity issues and not knowing who they are. That's totally true. Like you said, a lot of us, don't know who we are when we're growing up. We don't have, we have no sense of direction. Because when I grew up, I remember my mom was working hard, even though my stepfather came into play later on down the line, but he really wasn't like a role model or anything. Everything that my mom did, like when she went to work, she worked hard, and then probably like my grandmother or one of my aunts or uncles would watch us. They rotate shifts and things like that. So, of course, you're getting different experiences, but you didn't have nobody to look up to. You know what I mean? I'm talking about real role models. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about men, that go to work. They tell you, hey, this is the reason why you have to work. If you're going to have a kid out here, you better be willing to raise a kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you look at it, like, because a lot of us look towards the street. Like, I got a lot of, like I said, my manhood, Masculinity came from the streets. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't, anything in the household. You know what I mean? Me and my brother, because I have one brother, me and my brother, we were two different people. He was go to school. He was smart, went to one of the smartest schools in Philadelphia, graduated, went to Bloomsburg College, but I was always running street. We were two different people. You know what I mean? So again, I believe that it all comes down to, again, what are we feeding ourselves and who we're surrounding ourselves with. I believe it was mentioned in here that sometimes it's about, being that product of your environment. You know what I mean? That's huge too. You know what I mean? But everybody's different. Everybody has a different mentality and different trained way of thinking. You know what I'm saying? So here goes another one here. It says, yes, the father is not in the home. Mothers are very influential in the shaping of their children, and that's true.
Yes.
But the thing I will add to that, and I don't mean to hit the Devontae, but real quick. But with that though, I totally believe, and shout out to all the single mothers that broke their necks, raising their kids and things like that. And we have to remember at the end of the day, a mother cannot teach their sons how to be a man. That's very crucial. We got to remember that. So sometimes we may think, oh, well, I don't need no man to raise my child. I said, no, your son needs a male role model in their lives. A lot of times we may think, oh, dang, well, why my son acting like this or acting like that, or maybe feminine, this, that, and the third. Well, it's environment. You know what I'm saying?
Disagree, Carlos?
Well, go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm waiting for him to finish.
I can't tell if you agree or you disagree.
I highly disagree, but I'm glad he brought up the point because it gives us an opportunity to speak about that. Because in my experiences, what I've learned through studying, through my own personal experience, is that there's a great harm and violence that's enacted under the idea that a child can't become a man without a role model. And it discounts the fact that they're very harmful males that are fathers and that are affecting the lives of their children. And so every family doesn't have to be the same. And I think instilling or inculcating in a child the idea that he's nothing and that he's worthless because he doesn't have a certain parent or certain type of parent in his life, I think it's setting him up for failure early on. And you have to be careful with that because under this idea of, for example, protecting our children, we can enact tremendous violence against them while justifying ourselves because we're protecting them from white America or from society or the kinds of dangers that are out there on the street. And I'll give you an example. There's a book called Heavy. Heavy was written by an African-American man named Kiese Lamont. And he wrote the book to his mother. And in the book, he started it by saying, I wanted to write a lie. And then he goes on to say, you would have loved it. I would have learned nothing from it. And so what he begins to describe was a mother who was an intellectual, was a professor at a university, and she always used to have him read encyclopedias. And she used to tell him, through her abuse, I'm trying to protect you so that you don't get killed out there on the streets. The thing is, for a child, he may have an African-American mother to protect him from white America, but who's going to protect him from his African-American abusive mother? And so it brings up this question that's age-old throughout the centuries, and it goes beyond Plato, even though they coined him with the term, and it's who will guard the guardians. So I had my mother to protect me from my father. Who did I have to protect me from my mother?
So now I want to jump in if I can.
Go ahead.
So I think that brings us to a very important place and a place that is a common place for me constantly is where do we go from here, right? That constantly looks like, all right, with all of the historical context that we have, with all of the understanding, the knowledge, and the wisdom that we have, none of it means nothing if we cannot apply it to change where we're moving towards. And what it also does is expose this very polarizing rhetoric that exists in society that says the mother and the father are the be-all for a child, right? This is where a village comes into play again, and the community is supposed to act as a village. but we're so far removed from that space that someone like myself, I'm not friends with any males who I know cannot act as a mentor or a model for my sons. I have 3 sons. I would not waste any time in my life chilling, smoking, drinking, doing anything worthless with men who I consider just to be platonic friends if they cannot also act as mentors and models in my sons' lives, right? Because I'm going to hold my community accountable just the way that I show up for my community. So I think you're right. I think both things are true, that it isn't just up to a good or a bad parent to produce a functioning adult, right? Because we have seen the opposite happen in both respects. We have seen children who have been come from what we deem seemingly good environments turn into bad people, and we have seen children who have come from seemingly dire environments turn into amazing people. They are the exception to the rule. They should be the standard, but they are the exception to the rule. And that is the reality. The reality is that we would be remiss if we didn't say that this is not a real thing and this does not happen. And a parent, whether it's a father or a mother, is not the determining factor of how someone is going to end up. But the reality is, for most people, that's exactly what happens. Is those direct interactions or lack thereof is what, affects how they grow up, how they view life, and how they behave thereafter. So what I want to say to that as a mother is that I didn't realize how dire the need was until my son stabbed the boy. When my son stabbed the boy, it opened my eyes and I said, hold the fuck up. There's something going on here that I'm missing.
Language.
Oh, my bad.
We can curse, Keenan. We can curse.
Get that out. There's something going on here that I'm missing. And what I'm missing is the dynamic that a man brings into that, because what I understood was that my son had a problem. He knew he had a problem, and he decided that he was not going to burden his mother, and he was going to solve that problem on his own, as a man does, right? And he solved it like a child, really, right? Because he is a child, and he had no man to go to say, I got 5 boys that's trying to jump me on Monday. What do I do? So he armed himself in the way that he felt like a man should from a child's perspective. So I had to ask myself, what is my responsibility here to my son? Right? We had a conversation. And what that looked like is expressing to him that I now realize what you need. I know that I need to identify a healthy male mentor for you. Mentor does not have to be father. I don't have to get a stepdaddy for you. I just need to identify a healthy male mentor that is going to be consistent in your life, that is going to see you through into adulthood. It is my job to do that. It is my job to go locate therapy for you, whether it's talk therapy or other forms of therapy. So I know that I need to get this for you. And it is also important for me to get you a physical discipline for 2 different reasons. The first is so that you can release all of that pent-up energy that you have going on, and you can learn, right, how to deal with anger, how to deal with emotions, and how to deal with aggressors or situations that may arise like that, so you don't have to meet it with that level of violence again, right? But just like those children that you were referring to, Carlos, that are the exception to those rules, that despite what trauma their parents inflict on them, they still, the road still grows from concrete, is that I too, as a mother in them, am an exception to the rule. That most women do not have the capacity, whether it's the mental capacity, physical, spiritual, whatever, emotional, to put themselves in that position and then to follow through with that also.
Nice. Woo. Yeah, we going there. We already 34 minutes in. Like, I know that we keeping it down. Here we got just real quick. I know Didi and them mentioned a couple little things. She said, I'm on everybody's side. You're all making good points. And it's true. I mean, like you said, sometimes we may all have different perspectives, but at the same time, we have a common denominator, you know what I mean? But it's up to us. Again, communication is key. even in the household, as you just mentioned. Sometimes these kids, these boys, don't have outlets to go to say, "Hey, I'm going through something." There's been plenty of times where I got in fights in the hood, and then and I knew that they was going to probably be waiting at the bus stop or something, but I couldn't be like, "Yo, Dad, Uncle, or Dad, yo, they're gonna be at the bus stop waiting." Nah, we either had to fight or we went another route. You know what I'm saying? So, but go ahead, Carlos. Go ahead, get it in.
No, I want you to keep reading the comments. They're good.
Oh, the comments, yeah. This one here, Didi said here. She said the village doesn't even get along. So how is it that going to reach our children anything? That's true.
And I want to respond to that really quickly also. And what I want to say is that I see parents complain a lot. There is this disembodiment that exists in the hood, right? Where when from my generation, being a millennial and growing up in a neighborhood where my friends' parents were able to chasten me just like my mother would have, that doesn't happen anymore. That people have this, you can't correct my child mentality. So you're right, Didi. But at the same time, I hear parents complain all the time that there are nothing for the kids. And we have to be able to identify how our communities or our village shifts and evolves. And right now that looks like in the form of programs. And I hear parents say all the time, there's nothing for kids to do. There's nothing for kids to do. But I get newsletters from my kids' school every week. And when I say there is more than plenty for kids to do, and parents are not capitalizing on these opportunities for kids, they believe, I don't know, there's a historical context that supports the lack of parental engagement when it comes to children's academia in the hood, right? For a long time standing, parents are involved in the PTO. They don't show up. They don't show out. And there's a reason for that. But that doesn't help the solution. So now when it comes to that, parents have this idea that children are supposed to be identifying and solidifying opportunities for themselves. And the reality is they need somebody stewarding them in that direction, supporting them, doing all the paperwork, providing all the documentation that they need. There are youth work programs. There are opportunities with the city departments. There are after-school programs. There are internships. There are apprenticeships. There are so many things that are available to our children that parents are not capitalizing on because they want their community or their village to show up the way that they want it versus being able to take what is available to them.
And that's a good point. Because just to touch on that, like you said, even me growing up, I played all different sports. I played basketball. I played, and my mom was trying to put me in there. But at the same time, my mom still had to work and provide for the kids in the household. So sometimes it is a little struggle, but you can always find people, because I was in the Big Brother, Big Sister program and things like that. But like you said, I do believe, like you correctly said, a lot of the parents don't put an emphasis behind children to grow up and learn different gifts. Not just playing basketball in the schoolyard, but why don't you get them in music class or help them to get more engaged with different things, like you said, that is provided for them. But like you said, they want it to be in a form in the way they want it to come. Because if it's not their way, I don't want to go down anyway. Why didn't they do this? They should have did this. They should have did that. And usually, not as I tell, it's the mother that's saying that. You know what I'm saying? Because you know how women are. Women, they get it ain't this way, but you ain't going nowhere. So now you're displaying and projecting your fears on that child because it's something that you don't like or something that you have a disagreement with, and that's not cool. So now the child is looking like, I really wanted to play ball. I really wanted to go to that art class. Or we'll find another one. Then it get postponed to something else. You know what I mean? But go ahead. I see some comments here. Dee said, very true statement. She said, it's the things to do. It's just a matter of what you want to put your child in. And if the child will have that needed support. Parents don't participate as much as they used to. That's true. Totally true. They definitely participate at a block party. They participate at a damn, you know what I'm saying? It's easy when it's time to drink. They're not going to support the kids when you can get them in football, basketball, and all these different curricular activities, you know what I mean, to keep them out of trouble.
You said something that's so important, and it's something that I use in reference to postpartum depression all the time, right? And is that being up at 3 a.m. is cool when you partying, but it's not cool anymore when you got to feed a baby, right? So there's a lot to be said in that space that relates to what we're talking about here, which is the lack of the village. People are usually okay powering through when they have company, when they got support, when they got somebody cheering for them. But when they have to be alone in their head, just trying to power through, you know, that's when the negative feedback loop starts to kick in. And then Dee Dee said they want to be their children's friend and not their parent. And I think that's an important statement. And I think that's an important statement for us to unpack, especially as the Black and brown community around, that I do believe that parents are supposed to be their kids' friends.
Damn
I
right.
don't believe they're only supposed to be their kids' friends. That's just one of the
To an
things.
extent, though. To an extent. Now you gotta really rephrase the way you put that. They should be their friend too, but there's boundaries, there's limits.
Hold on. There's boundaries and limits in any friendship you have, right?
Yes,
that's true.
And that's
but your parents it got to be held a little higher.
So what I'm saying is they can't just only be a friend. They have to be a friend. They have to be a protector. They got to be a provider. They got to be a navigator. They have to be so much more than just a friend, but they have to be a friend too. And that's where Black and brown parents have removed themselves and saying, I'm not your little friend.
Yes.
Go ahead, Carlos.
And I'll tell you what, and this is like important that a lot of parents understand this. I had a son when I was 14 years old, right? I watched my son grow up from prison throughout the entire 24 years. When my son was old enough to understand what I wanted to tell him, I told him, I'm not going to act as if I'm your father because I have absolutely no right. The best chance I have, or we have, of forming a relationship is if you allow me to understand you as a person, as you develop, as you have your own ideas, your own thoughts, whatever it may be. That resulted in my son and I having a better relationship than I've ever had with my own parents and then any other male around him on the outside. And so you have to be very, very careful when we talk about what a friend looks like, because a friend can be the greatest thing if the right standards, expectations, nurturing, respect, boundaries, and guidance are provided. There's nothing better in life than a friend that'll tell you what you're doing wrong when you're wrong, and that'll also support you along the way. Parents have a similar role as well. And at worst, what happens when you try to deprive the child of the kind of intimacy that a friendship can help him with, he'll go somewhere else to get it. And it might not be the same kind of friends.
So what you said is crazy, because now the reason why in the Black community, if we think about it by default, why we say I ain't your little friend or you can't be friends with your kids is because think about the role that our friends play in our life and what our relationships look like. They're unhealthy. They're toxic.
We never had healthy friendships
with our friends. We smoke with our friends. We drink with our friends. We don't become successful with our friends. We don't practice group economics with our friends. So when we think about what a friendship looks like, we think about it from that lens. Now, a healthy friend is exactly what Carlos stated. So now, if we want to get to the root of what we're talking about, men and violence, is that you actually have to be your son's friend. If you're not your son's friend, how would they feel comfortable coming to you and telling you the things that they need to tell you for you to guide them in the right direction? Right? So the reality is, friendship dynamics, like any other relationships, have to have boundaries and standards to them. And the parent gets to set that standard. But I have created such a friendship with my children, just as Carlos has with his son, that my kids are not just comfortable telling me everything, that at the age of 17, where I thought I was grown and doing whatever I wanted to do, my daughter still comes to me and asks me permission to even walk to the corner store. That's the level of respect in our friendship.
It is, absolutely. And there's another thing too that you mentioned and that we all can attest to. Growing up, it was always a saying, you have no friends. Don't trust anybody. And so if that's the idea, of course, you would want to draw away from that kind of intimacy between you and your child or your children.
Yo, it's crazy that you said that, because I have a young man, a poet, who's going to be, you know, he's should be a part of the Connecticut youth slam team. I don't want to say things without knowing them, but he's an amazing poet named Rudley. And he has a poem where he says exactly what you just said. He says, my parents, what happens when your family tells you to not trust outsiders, but then you can't even trust them either? You know, so this becomes an issue that parents create and start the cognitive dissonance that children experience throughout their lifetime that drives them in the directions that they do.
Yeah. True. And y'all, and we definitely, I know we on that 45-minute mark. I mean, I know we could keep going. We can go on and on. You know, last time we went on for about an hour and 15 minutes. You know what I mean? We forgot how to hit that mute button. But again, like I said, we can read this last little comment here. Didi, she said, yeah, Didi, you said, hey, Didi, you talk about, okay, I'm done, but then you bringing up paragraphs on this job, you know, but it's cool though. We like the engagement. We're not discouraging any Yex where you go. It says you as a parent can be the friend and get them comfortable to talk to you. However, you want that to be, but have to be willing to step back into the parent zone when needed. Absolutely. And that's where many fell, and that's absolutely true. Next thing she said, because parents don't step back into the parent mode when needed, they begin to accept disrespect from their children, which then causes disrespect to the community. That's absolutely true, because they're going to think that the minute that they can get away with it with their parents, that they could disrespect anybody else in the community. They're going to think that because they know that their parents will take up for them, and they can't do no wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So, but where did Yex go? Yex
will be back. Will be back.
Okay.
She probably logged on and log it back in. But this is what I want to do too. I want us to do this at the end of every podcast. Since it's called No Excuses, we can speak about the topic of multi-layered trauma and men in violence. But we have to state what is not an excuse. And so understanding that I grew up witnessing violence and decided to perpetuate violence, while my brothers and sisters took a different route and decided no, because I've seen what that kind of harm does, I'm not going to engage in the same thing. So I think it's important to remember that there's certain excuses that aren't valid when it comes to being violent and to perpetuate the same violence that we were exposed to. What that looks like is a conversation we can have in the future. But nonetheless, I don't think that people who are traumatized should be able to use that as an excuse to continue to traumatize and enact violence against others.
Absolutely. And we appreciate those words there, Carlos. And like I said, I know we're going on 48 minutes right now. But again, we're on the No Excuse podcast, dealing with the topic of men and violence. This is very profound. We're just asking that everybody go ahead, like, share, comment, get people involved, and also be on the lookout for the flyer that we're going to be posting up, because we're going to be going live a lot often. We're going to start this podcast off right. We're going to try to get it up on Spotify and different platforms, just so we can just start making some, great content. You know what I'm saying? Building, this is what it's all about. We understand that a lot of the podcast world is oversaturated, but there's a lot of things that we can expound on, especially coming from the situation and the background we come from, at that 15 years of age, going to prison, coming on. It's a lot of different things that we have to touch on that the community is not talking about at all. So when we do converse, when we do exchange, great vibes and energies, this, it becomes a great thing. You know what I mean? And like I said, I know there's plenty of people that spoke with us, Carlos, that want us to come out and speak, at these different occasions and different engagements, which will be a great platform. And I know we'll talk more too, Carlos, about, with the programs and things that you develop, things of that nature. It's going to be very good. Again, everybody just stay tuned. We appreciate y'all logging in tonight. Thank you for all the viewers. Excuse me. I want y'all to have a great night. Again, don't forget, if you never purchased it yet, the Unspoken Truth Life Story. Carlos, you're going to be having your book publishing pretty soon, too. You know what I'm saying? You're going to be throwing it up here, too. Thank you so much, Dee Dee. Yes, it was very good. We appreciate it. Like I said, sorry, y'all, that we didn't get the heads up. We tried to put the flyer out, but then we waited. But it's okay. We're going to do better. We're just, starting things off. It's going to be off to the right foot. So, again, go get that book, Unspoken Truth. Remember, great inserts on the back. Be on the look for more pictures and videos, from that day, of us speaking, these book signings. Again, so Carlos, any last words to the viewers?
I appreciate y'all. I love doing this. Conversation with Keenan Thompson.
Keenan Thompson. Oh, man, he tried to say I was on Good Burger. Oh, man. Oh, y'all better laugh.
We got to bring Yex. We got to bring Yex back.
He said Keenan Thompson. Keenan Hudson. Oh, man. He said Keenan Thompson.
We got to bring Yex back too, man.
Yeah, I appreciate, like I said, it's great convo, great dialect.
It is.
Great energy exchange, like I said. Shout out to Yex, even though she logged off. But it's all good. She gonna be back on next week. Like I said, shout out to her for even coming up with this. Like I said, the headlines and for her being very articulate. You know what I mean, and being able to expound different perspectives. That's what we want. We want different perspectives of life. Again, and be on the lookout for other guests as well. It won't just be us, it'll be other people that's coming on too, to really give some insight and input. But thank y'all. We're gonna be giving y'all a heads up in the near future. So y'all take care, be blessed, and we'll get at y'all later. All right. Peace.